Somewhere deep in the heart of Africa, a new kind of being opened its eyes to a world it had yet to understand. A creature with a familiar form, a human face, a bipedal frame, and a brain that carried the seeds of thought. It looked like us, but it wasn't yet us. This is the story of the birth of Homo sapiens, the story of us. According to fossil and genetic evidence, anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens, emerged in Africa around 320,000 years ago, likely evolving from populations of Homo heidelbergensis. These were humans who, in both skeletal structure and skull shape, bore a striking resemblance to people alive today. But a modern body didn't necessarily mean a modern mind. While this new species had greater cognitive potential than its ancestors, it would take thousands of years before those mental capacities translated into culture, tools, and behavior. What archaeologists today call behavioral modernity reflects a shift in how early humans lived, produced, and connected socially. Evidence shows that up until the end of the Middle Paleolithic, the behaviors of Homo sapiens were not significantly different from those of the Neanderthals. Yet between 100,000 and 70,000 years ago, subtle but transformative signs began to appear in Africa: symbolic thinking, abstract ideas, creative tool use. And by 50,000 to 40,000 years ago, traces of these behaviors spread across the continent and beyond. That's when a crucial distinction was born between humans who merely looked modern and humans who thought in modern ways. Humans who were truly modern, not just in form, but in mind, in culture, and in the legacy they would leave behind. Scientists refer to this second wave as Homo sapiens sapiens, behaviorally modern humans. The oldest fossil evidence of anatomically modern humans comes from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco. These remains suggest that our species walked the African landscape at least 315,000 years ago. But the story isn't written only in bones, it's in our DNA. And that DNA reveals a powerful truth. All of us, every human alive today, can trace their roots back to a small population in Africa, a group that began a journey across the earth over 200,000 years ago. For early Homo sapiens, the world was anything but easy: shifting climates, unstable ecosystems, and, perhaps most critically, competition from other human species who had already laid claim to the land. Around 220,000 years ago, small bands of early Homo sapiens took their first bold steps beyond the African continent. But this initial migration was no triumph. Contrary to what we might expect, these early humans held no decisive advantage over the native Neanderthals of Eurasia, not in tools, not in behavior, not in adaptability. And so, in their first encounters with these seasoned competitors, they faltered. Except for a few rare cases, they failed to move beyond the Levant and the Arabian Peninsula. Most of these pioneering groups either vanished or were pushed back into Africa. The Levant, narrow, forested, and strategically positioned, became the crucial meeting ground of species. Stretching from the Taurus Zagros mountains of modern Turkey down to the Sinai Peninsula, this corridor included what is now Lebanon, Syria, Israel, Jordan, and parts of Turkey and Egypt. Here, in over 40 Middle Paleolithic sites, archaeologists have unearthed clues to a deep and ancient rivalry. Fossils of Neanderthals have been found in caves like Tabun, Shukba, and Amud, while the remains of early modern humans have emerged from Eskul and Kafze, many nestled in the rugged limestone of Mount Carmel. There were two possible routes for human expansion out of Africa: the southern path, across the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, opened or closed depending on sea level changes over the millennia, and the northern path through the Levant offered a friendlier bridge thanks to ecological similarities with East Africa. But despite these advantages, no widespread expansion beyond this region occurred during the Middle Paleolithic. Likewise, it seems the Neanderthals of the Levant never ventured southward, remaining in the Mediterranean forests of North Africa. Why didn't they cross the threshold into sub-Saharan Africa? One possible answer: disease. The tropics, rich in biodiversity, are also rife with pathogens, some of which may have deterred Neanderthals from venturing further. The discovery of Middle Paleolithic fossils in Wadi el Mughara, the Valley of the Caves, at Mount Carmel, opened a new chapter in our story. A story not only of migration, but of encounter, of species face to face in a fragile balance, each capable of carrying the human story forward. In the 19th century, and well into the 20th, many scholars envisioned human evolution as a neat, linear progression, a simplistic tale in which each passing era brought forth beings more complex, more advanced, and more complete. And it was within this framework that a hypothesis took shape, one known as the multi-regional model. According to this theory, Homo sapiens sapiens, modern humans, didn't arise from a single point of origin. Instead, they evolved independently and simultaneously in different corners of the world. In East Asia, it claimed, the Peking man, Homo erectus, gradually transformed into modern humans. In Africa, Homo erectus evolved into Homo heidelbergensis, and from there to Homo sapiens. And in Europe, Homo erectus gave rise to the Neanderthals, who were then thought to have slowly transitioned into modern humans. This theory, which was proposed by the German anthropologist Franz Weidenreich, regarded the existence of morphological similarities among modern humans in different regions as the result of genetic intermixing during migrations and intercontinental interactions. But at that time, the science of genetics had not yet entered the arena. All conclusions were drawn from bones, from comparisons of skulls and skeletal forms. For decades, discoveries in the Levant seemed to support this view. The early modern human remains found in the caves of Skul and Kafse, alongside Neanderthals in nearby sites like Tabun, Amud, and Kibara, appeared to suggest a gradual transformation. The Skul and Kafse skulls bore features reminiscent of Neanderthals, prominent brow ridges, projecting faces. To advocates of the multi-regional theory, these fossils were seen as the missing links in the Great Chain, from archaic to modern. Until the late 20th century, most fossils were dated using radiocarbon methods, effective only up to around 45,000 years. And so, no one truly knew which came first, the early modern humans of Kafse and Skul, or the Neanderthals of the Levant. The entire timeline rested on shape, not age. But then came the 1990s, a decade that would shatter long-held assumptions. With the arrival of advanced dating techniques, researchers were finally able to anchor fossils to time, and the results were stunning. Kafse was not younger than the Neanderthals, it was older. The cave dated back 91,000 years, Skul even further, 115,000 years. While Neanderthals from Amud, long thought to be ancestral, turned out to be younger, dating between 70,000 and 50,000 years ago. The once sturdy idea that Neanderthals gradually evolved into modern humans in the Levant began to crumble. But the second blow was even more devastating. Genetics entered the scene. With the rise of genetic science, one thing became abundantly clear. All modern humans, whether living in Africa, Asia, or Europe, are strikingly similar at the genetic level. So similar, in fact, that it's almost impossible for our ancestry to have sprung from multiple, independent origins around the world. If it had, we would expect to see vast differences, both in our bodies and in our genomes, especially if our ancestors had spent hundreds of thousands of years apart, evolving under different climates. And so, the idea of a multi-regional origin collapsed. In the final decades of the 20th century, our understanding of human origins began to shift. A new perspective emerged, one that didn't seek our birth in scattered points across the globe, but instead within the heart of Africa. More recently, a refined theory known as the African multi-regional model has captured the attention of scientists. According to this view, Homo sapiens did not emerge from a single location, but rather evolved within several semi-isolated populations spread across Africa. Each of these populations followed its own evolutionary path, distinct yet deeply intertwined. And it's not just archaeologists who suggest this. Genetic research has also revealed that we are the simultaneous offspring of several ancestral groups. Some of humanity's key innovations, such as making complex tools, symbolic behaviors, or morphological changes like a flatter face, did not arise in one place alone. Instead, they appear to have emerged independently in different regions of Africa and then gradually spread through mixing between populations. It's as if the human mind itself was awakening in parallel across the continent. Modern behavior may not have been a single spark, but rather the harmony of many voices in the great orchestra of African evolution. Fossils from the mountains of Morocco to the coasts of East Africa challenge the idea of a single cradle of humanity. For example, the human remains from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco differ in facial structure from those found in Eastern Africa. Similarly, the stone cultures of Southern, Central, and Eastern Africa each have their own signature and complexity, perhaps what we might call a multipolar origin of the human mind. This biological and cultural diversity paints a vivid picture of human co-creation across the mother continent. The human genome is a book, one that holds hundreds of thousands of years of history in every cell. And now we know it doesn't tell a linear story. Genetic studies on modern humans reveal that long before there was a we were separated. Early Homo sapiens populations across Africa were isolated by climate shifts and environmental barriers, only to reconnect later through waves of migration and mixing. This dance of separation and reunion gave rise to the remarkable genetic diversity that still exists among African populations today. There is a principle in biology: the older a species is in a region, the greater its genetic diversity. And the highest genetic diversity in humans today is still found among the indigenous populations of Africa, where evolution, quietly and patiently, was crafting us. Modern humans are the outcome of repeated merging of separate paths, as well as genetic bottlenecks. Around 50 to 60,000 years ago, a small group of modern humans left Africa, and the founder effect that followed led to a dramatic reduction in genetic diversity among non-African populations. But what made these early humans step beyond the cradle of their birth? Between 130,000 and 80,000 years ago, the first waves of Homo sapiens began moving out, reaching the Levant, the eastern Mediterranean. At the very same time, Neanderthals were arriving in the region from Eurasia. Two species, two paths, one shared land. And nature's law? Competition. In this early encounter, the Homo sapiens communities of Skul and Kafse seem to have prevailed, at least for a while. Evidence suggests they possessed more diverse and efficient tools, broader, thinner flakes made from raw materials that yielded more cutting edges. But it wasn't just technology that set them apart. For the first time, we see traces of symbolic thought, deliberate burials, ornaments, and the use of ochre pigments. Shells carried from over 30 kilometers away were buried with the dead, signs of complex social networks and an awakening mind. But the spring of these early modern humans was short-lived. Between 75,000 and 50,000 years ago, the climate in the Levant cooled rapidly. Steppes and deserts expanded, forests retreated. As the environment changed, traces of modern humans disappeared, while signs of Neanderthal return re-emerged in the very same caves. Perhaps this marked the failure of the School and Kafsik communities in the face of a rival population better suited to the cold. Archaeological layers linked to Neanderthals in the Levant show long-term settlements, places used for more than one season. In Kabara Cave, the persistent use of hearths suggests lasting occupation. These extended stays, along with a broader diet and better adaptation to cooler climates, gave Neanderthals the upper hand. Their dominance, particularly in the Mediterranean forests of the eastern Levant, may have blocked further spread of early Homo sapiens. If so, the School and Kafse populations represent a vanished lineage, cut off from the future. In this context, the competition hypothesis helps explain three key questions. Why did modern humans appear in the Levant? Why did the School and Kafse groups vanish? And how, 50,000 years ago, did Homo sapiens ultimately replace the Neanderthals? Most of these rivalries were likely indirect. The Levant could only support 10,000 to 15,000 people at most. The real struggle? To secure the best habitats, the richest resources. Yes, early modern humans were pushed aside in this first round, but this was not the end of the story. Early modern humans, despite their familiar appearance, did not necessarily behave in ways we would consider modern. But then came a second wave between 70,000 and 50,000 years ago. A new generation of Homo sapiens left Africa once again, and this time they didn't retreat. With sharper adaptive strategies and deeper behavioral complexity, they began to edge out their ancient rivals, the Neanderthals. It wasn't just luck or numbers. These differences had roots deep in their biology. And perhaps this wasn't the only battlefield. Back in Africa, other archaic humans still roamed, likely shaping the slow and gradual transition from the Middle to the later Stone Age. One of the most iconic pieces of evidence for early Homo sapiens in Africa comes from a place called Herto in modern-day Ethiopia. Discovered in 2005, the Herto skull, estimated to be around 160,000 years old, belonged to an anatomically modern human. It was found alongside partial remains of both an adult and a child, stone tools from the Middle Stone Age, and bones of butchered animals. That same year, another remarkable fossil was re-examined, skull fragments from Omo, also in Ethiopia. Long thought to be an early modern human, this fossil was now dated to about 195,000 years ago. Although the Omo specimen doesn't display all the traits of a modern human, it bears a striking resemblance to us in its cranial features, just like Herto. And in 2017, a discovery from Jebel Irhoud in Morocco pushed the timeline even further back. Human remains unearthed. They were dated to an astonishing 315,000 years ago, redrawing the boundaries of when and where our story truly began. Archaeological discoveries tell a fascinating story, a story where many of our everyday behaviors have roots far deeper in time than we ever imagined. Take blades, for instance. While they became common only much later, evidence suggests that humans in East Africa were already crafting blade-like tools as early as 250,000 years ago. And the first signs of pigment grinding and long-distance transport of resources. They go back around 100,000 years. These aren't just random acts. They're early sparks of modern behavior, the beginnings of a lifestyle that would later define us. In Blombos Cave, South Africa, archaeologists uncovered flat pieces of ochre carved with geometric patterns dating back 75,000 years, and next to them, carefully pierced seashells, likely worn as personal ornaments. In another 80,000-year-old site in Central Africa, barbed bone spears were found, evidence of ingenuity and intent. Scattered though they are, these clues whisper the same message. By 100,000 years ago, something new was awakening in the human mind. A potential, creative, symbolic, far-reaching, was beginning to unfold. And today we know that traces of Homo sapiens have even been found in Israel and Greece, dating as far back as 220,000 years ago. These early migrations, too, were short-lived and ultimately unsuccessful. But each discovery adds another piece to the puzzle that is us, the story of Homo sapiens, the story of us.